What's up, Super Swim Team? So between uploads, I'd like to fill in the gaps by uploading short little rants and raves, little reflections, not necessarily reviews, but thoughts and observations of newer episode seasons of films of things that have recently come out. There are going to be spoilers in the back half of this video, so if you haven't seen the film, you're good to watch until the spoiler alert. So without further ado, here's Antman and the Wasp. I was really blown away by this movie. It feels odd to think that, seeing as I've seen a lot of fan backlash on this movie. But considering the 4 films preceding it received almost universal praise, I can understand why this happened. I don't think the film met everyone's expectations, but it met mine, which were simply to be better than the first Antman. And oh my Bahamut, does it succeed in every way on that front. In the first Antman, we find out that Janet has been lost in the quantum realm for over 2 decades. In the opening, they redo a scene from Antman and add a few additional heartbreaking moments. And I knew what was going to happen because I had seen the first film, but man, they really cranked it up a notch and they had me in tears. Legit mournful tears. I mean, they really turned it into an up moment and it works so well. After Peyton Reed successfully rips the sad out of you, we flash forward to Scott playing with Cassie, having built an elaborate fort inside of his home fort. The opening 2 scenes establish exactly what this movie is about. It's a family movie. No, not a G-rated movie, but a movie about a family coming back together to save one of their own. This is a movie about how we're stronger together instead of apart. And I find it interesting that out of all the great Cape family dynasties, be they Supermans, Batmans, Spider-Mans, or Flashes, that this is the first film to really showcase that family super team dynamic. Not counting Fantastic Four and Incredibles, of course. But on that note, I find the family centricity of the first Fantastic Four movie to be one of the most redeeming aspects of that film. Maybe I'll make a video about that one day. The movie's inciting action is when the Wasp is able to telepathically reach out to Scott after Janet and Hank perform an experiment to try and see if they can create a quantum bridge to the microverse. From there, all the usual players and elements of a classic Marvel superhero story start to fall into place. Ant-Man 1 was a heist movie through and through. And much of that is carried over here, though it's not quite focused on as heavily as in the first film. But on that note, this film has one of the best uses of the MacGuffin I've ever seen. I love the scenes of everyone trying to get the shrunk down building, and there's a few heist-esque scenes, but the majority are relegated to the start of the film, not counting the race to the finish line seen at the climax of the film. Seeing all of that carried over was great. And it feels like something that really makes Ant-Man and the Wasp unique when compared to other MCU offerings. But speaking of things carried over that were great, I thought Louise and XCon were awesome as always. The subplot about the guy starting a security company that's already failing was hilarious. All the boys are back and they're hilarious as ever. Louise especially. But the movie is complicated and somewhat weakened by the introduction of the primary antagonist. Most of my complaints about Ghost are the same as presented here. Ghost is dull. She's not relatable. They try to make us understand her motivations, but she still comes off as stilted and unnecessarily cruel. Her only motivation is survival at whatever cost. And this comes off as cheap and uninspired. Ghost has a quantum illness, causing her body to stay in a constant state of flux due to her unstable molecules. Every part of Ghost's subplot feels like a cheap way to connect it to the Save Janet plot. Having a villain relegated to the B plot of the movie proved very detrimental to the end product. This is twice as painful considering the fact that we just had some of the best villains in the MCU the past few years. And the villain of the film doesn't quite feel like a big bad boss. It feels like just another hoop to go through to check another check off the to-do list. Alright, I know we've had our fun, but this is the point where I cross over into spoiler territory. So if you haven't seen the first film yet, scroll down, click like, then click add to later, and then come back when you finish. Bill Foster was great, but confusing. Halfway through, I wasn't sure what his intentions were exactly. Sometimes he acted like he just wanted revenge, and sometimes he acted like he just wanted to help Ghost. And I think the point was supposed to be that his hubris was the same as Hank's and just as large, but in the bickering and fighting, all of that got lost somewhere. This whole B-plot seems forced. Bill Foster was a SHIELD scientist that Hank had removed from his position, and Ghost's father was a scientist in a similar position. The only connection these two characters share is their disdain for Hank Pym, which seems almost universal in any given universe in the Marvel multiverse. The only thing that really redeemed Foster was how he turned on Ghost at the end, even though he knew that this was her plan most of the time. The sudden change in character really doesn't make much sense. Foster is one of the characters I was most excited to see, and his underutilization and relegation to supervillain tech support felt really demeaning to the character's history, which was frustrating considering how much I loved his introductory scene. But nearly as soon as you find out he's in league with Ghost, his whole arc goes drastically downhill. Lawrence Fishburne is one of my favorite actors, and he usually gives stellar performances. And he does give a good performance here when he's given the chance, but unfortunately I don't feel like he was always given much to work with in the script here. Also, most of the climax was spoiled in the trailers and commercials for the film. I feel like these scenes would have been more impactful if I hadn't seen them everywhere before I watched the movie. The repercussions for this movie as a whole are very unique and interesting. It looks like Janet is a wizard, kind of like Doctor Strange now. And this is primarily based off of the visual cues and the performance of the character, such as the way she touches Hank's head in the quantum realm, which mirrors the Ancient One instructing Strange. And since we're on that note, I just want to point out that in that scene, the quantum realm is a part of the reality that gets worked by the Ancient One's powers. The idea that magic is a science we don't understand yet comes up a lot in the MCU, and I think Janet's new powers are a sort of example of that. And I don't think that it's a stretch of the imagination to assume that Doctor Strange and other magic wielders may draw their power from the quantum realm, or at least a part of it. I think that's the implication presented here. But regardless, seeing Janet become a wizard or gain wizard-esque powers was not something I expected at all. Amongst it all, one of the things I was most excited about was all the hints about Casey becoming Stature. This is something I think we'll see sooner than later, and in fact, you should go check out my Avengers 4 speculation video here. So if you're interested in that, you should go check it out. Overall, I thought Antman and the Wasp was a solid 7 out of 10. It wasn't great, but it was still good, and that's just fine in my book. So that being that, I'll see you next time. Swim Team Captain 7, signing off.